Today, we will explore a topic that many misunderstand, leading them to carry burdens that were never theirs to bear. We are discussing the nature of karmic obstacles, spiritual forces that create suffering, delay growth, and keep people trapped in cycles of hardship. Many dedicate themselves to spiritual practice, seek wisdom, and cultivate good deeds, yet they continue to face unseen barriers. These obstacles are the result of past actions, unresolved karma, and attachments that have not yet been relinquished. Like waves that return to the shore, the consequences of past actions shape our present reality. If we do not recognize the root of our suffering, we will continue to walk in ignorance, unable to break free from the cycles that bind us. But today, ignorance will be dispelled by wisdom, and with the light of awareness, liberation will begin. No karmic weight is too heavy to lift, and no suffering is beyond the reach of transformation. Through mindfulness, right effort, and compassionate action, every illusion of limitation can be dissolved. Many do not realize that suffering is not random. It follows the laws of cause and effect. Just as a seed planted in the past grows into a tree, our past thoughts, words, and deeds have shaped the conditions we face today. If a person experiences repeated failures, misfortunes, or obstacles that seem impossible to overcome, it is often because the roots of their suffering remain unexamined. But there is a way forward. With wisdom and insight, we can uproot ignorance and cultivate clarity, breaking free from the illusions that keep us bound. The Buddha taught that the mind is the source of all suffering and all liberation. A restless mind, attached to desire and fear, creates suffering. But a mind that sees clearly, that acts with kindness and wisdom, finds freedom. When we awaken to this truth, we are no longer bound by the past. We are empowered to shape a new destiny. Many think that karmic obstacles are external forces beyond their control. They believe their struggles come from fate or chance, but the truth is that these obstacles are the results of choices, conscious or unconscious, made in the past. Just as a shadow follows the body, suffering follows an unwise mind. However, karma is not a punishment, it is a teacher. It does not seek to harm, but to awaken. When we recognize the lessons hidden within our struggles, we gain the power to transform them. Like a lotus rising from the mud, we too can rise above our suffering when we align our thoughts and actions with wisdom. Too often, people feel trapped under an invisible weight, unable to move forward no matter how hard they try. It is like running against the current of a river, only to be pushed back again and again. This is the nature of unresolved karma. Just as a fire continues to burn as long as there is fuel, suffering continues as long as there are unexamined attachments and unwise actions. But there is good news. Wisdom can extinguish suffering. Just as a lamp dispels darkness, awareness dissolves ignorance. The moment we turn inward, reflect deeply, and begin to cultivate the right understanding, the barriers before us begin to crumble. The Buddha taught that nothing arises without a cause. If suffering is present, there is a reason. If karmic obstacles persist, there is an entry point that must be understood and closed. Just as a tree cannot grow without a seed, suffering cannot arise without conditions that allow it to take root. To overcome suffering, we must first recognize its origin. A person who ignores the roots of their suffering will continue to struggle without understanding why. But when we examine our thoughts, words, and actions with honesty, we gain the power to change. The greatest obstacle to liberation is not external. It is within. It is the unwillingness to look deeply, to see clearly, and to transform through wisdom. The first step to breaking free from karmic suffering is identifying its roots. Many assume that hardships are simply part of life, but the Buddha taught that everything arises from causes and conditions. If a person is caught in cycles of suffering, there is a reason. There is a pattern that must be understood, a lesson that must be learned, and a path that must be followed. One of the most dangerous mistakes is to dismiss suffering as fate. The Buddha said, "Just as a skilled farmer removes weeds from his field, so too must one remove ignorance from the mind." If we do not recognize what is causing our suffering, we cannot uproot it. Many karmic obstacles arise from past actions, our own or those of our ancestors. Just as a river carries the memory of past storms, our present lives are shaped by the choices made before us. Some burdens are inherited and passed down through generations. Patterns of suffering, poverty, conflict, illness often have deep spiritual roots. But just as suffering can be inherited, so too can wisdom. When one person in a family chooses to live with awareness, cultivate virtue, and dedicate themselves to kindness, they break the cycle of suffering for future generations. They become the light that guides others out of the darkness. Ignorance is the greatest cause of suffering. Many people live their entire lives unaware of the spiritual forces shaping their reality. They repeat the same mistakes, follow the same destructive patterns, and wonder why they remain trapped. But once wisdom enters the mind, ignorance can no longer remain. The Buddha taught that to see clearly is to be free. The moment you recognize the nature of your suffering, you begin to loosen its grip. Awareness is the first step to liberation. When you become aware of the unseen forces shaping your life, you gain the power to transform them. Another source of karmic obstacles is speech. Words carry power, they shape reality. The Buddha taught that right speech is essential to the path of liberation. Harsh words, lies, and negative speech create suffering, not just for others but for ourselves. If a person constantly speaks words of failure, doubt, and limitation, they unknowingly reinforce their suffering. A wise person speaks with awareness. They understand that every word is a seed planted in the mind. Just as a gardener chooses what to plant, so too must we choose our words carefully. Speak with kindness, with mindfulness, and with the intention to uplift, and you will see your reality begin to change. Many people are unaware that past actions, even those of their ancestors, can shape their present reality. Families often pass down not just wealth and traditions, but also unresolved karma. If past generations engaged in harm, dishonesty, or unwise actions, their descendants may inherit the consequences. However, the Buddha taught that liberation is always possible. Just as darkness cannot remain in the presence of light, past karma cannot remain when wisdom is present. A single act of awareness, a single moment of compassion, can begin to undo lifetimes of suffering. One of the most powerful sources of karmic suffering is attachment to unwise beliefs and practices. Many unknowingly tie themselves to suffering through their attachments, to status, to material wealth, to power. Others unknowingly hold on to superstitions, old traditions, and practices that do not serve their highest good. In the teachings of the Buddha, the law of cause and effect governs all things. Our actions, both past and present, shape our reality, just as the seeds we plant determine the fruit we harvest. When a person moves away from the path of wisdom and right conduct, they invite suffering, much like a traveler who ignores the signs of a storm ahead. The suffering that follows is not a punishment from an external force, but the natural consequence of unwise actions. Karma, like a river, flows according to the choices we make. If we act with greed, hatred, or ignorance, we create conditions for suffering. If we live with mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom, we cultivate peace and joy. When obstacles arise, they are not random misfortunes but signs pointing us back to the right path. The wise do not curse the wind for changing direction. They adjust their sails and continue forward. Some people feel burdened by unseen forces as if an invisible weight holds them back. They may experience repeated struggles, financial hardship, or emotional distress, yet they do not see the cause. This is why self-reflection is crucial. The Buddha taught that wisdom is the light that reveals the hidden roots of suffering. Through deep introspection, we begin to see the patterns that have shaped our lives and understand how our past choices, whether in this life or previous ones, have created our present circumstances. In the same way that a house filled with dust must be cleaned before it can shine, our hearts and minds must be purified from past ignorance before we can experience true freedom. Just as a tree cannot grow strong if its roots are diseased, we cannot progress if we are bound by unwholesome habits and unresolved karma. It is not enough to merely wish for freedom from suffering. We must take action. The Buddha advised his disciples to cultivate purity of thought, speech, and action. To break free from negative karma, one must first identify and remove the causes that sustain it. This may require letting go of toxic relationships, harmful habits, or material attachments that hinder spiritual growth. A person who clings to anger and resentment, for example, carries a heavy burden that prevents them from moving forward. True liberation begins with letting go. The Buddha once said, "Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal law." If we wish to break free from suffering, we must replace negative actions with positive ones, much like replacing a bitter fruit with a sweet one. Many people wonder why they continue to face the same struggles despite their efforts to change. The answer lies in the law of karma. The conditions of our present life are the result of past causes. If one does not fully uproot the causes of suffering, the effects will continue to appear, much like a tree that keeps growing back after being cut at the surface but not at the root. Breaking free requires conscious effort and deep transformation. One must not only recognize harmful patterns but also actively dismantle them. Just as a river carves new pathways over time, so too must we reshape our minds and actions through mindfulness and wisdom. By dedicating ourselves to the right speech, right action, and right thought, we gradually free ourselves from past burdens and step into a life of greater clarity and peace. The second step to breaking free from karmic obstacles is exercising our inner strength, the power of our own awareness and determination. Many people recognize their suffering but resign themselves to it, believing that struggle is simply their fate. This is a misunderstanding. The Buddha did not teach resignation. He taught liberation. Suffering exists, but so does a path to the end of suffering. When a person takes responsibility for their own mind and actions, they step into their true power. The river of karma may be strong, but a mindful person is like a skilled navigator who can guide their vessel toward calmer waters. Many believe that karma is an unchangeable force, but this is not true. The Buddha taught that while past actions have created present conditions, present actions shape the future. A person who has made mistakes in the past is not condemned to suffer forever. Each moment is a new opportunity to create positive karma and move toward liberation. A person trapped in suffering must not simply endure it but must rise up and take conscious action to change their course. Just as a warrior does not surrender to fear but moves forward with courage, We must meet our challenges with wisdom and strength. The mind is both the creator of suffering and the key to liberation. The power of words and thoughts cannot be underestimated. The Buddha taught that what we think, we become. If a person constantly speaks words of failure and limitation, they reinforce those conditions in their lives. However, when one begins to cultivate thoughts of possibility, gratitude, and determination, they shift their reality. Too often, people unknowingly imprison themselves with their own speech. They say, "I will never succeed," "I am not good enough," or "I am doomed to suffer." These words, repeated over time, become the walls of their own suffering. But just as a bird is not meant to remain in a cage, the human spirit is not meant to be bound by limitation. To break free, we must speak words of wisdom and empowerment. We must declare, "I am capable. I am on the path to peace. I am free." By shifting our inner dialogue, we begin to dissolve the barriers that once held us back. This is not simply wishful thinking. It is the practice of aligning our minds with truth. The Buddha did not say that suffering vanishes overnight. He taught that through steady practice we cultivate a new way of being. Just as a garden flourishes with daily care, the mind flourishes when nurtured with mindfulness and the right intention. Breaking karmic cycles also requires renouncing harmful attachments. Many people unknowingly cling to habits, beliefs, or relationships that reinforce their suffering. They continue to associate with those who drain their energy, hold on to past grievances, or resist the inner work required for transformation. To truly break free, we must let go. Let go of resentment. Let go of guilt. Let go of fear. The Buddha taught that clinging is the root of suffering. If we wish to experience peace, we must release all that no longer serves our highest good. Another essential step in breaking karmic obstacles is making amends. If we have wronged others, we must seek to make things right. If we have harmed ourselves through self-doubt and self-criticism, we must cultivate self-compassion. Just as a fire cannot burn without fuel, suffering cannot continue without attachment. Forgiveness, both for ourselves and for others, is a key to liberation. When we forgive, we free ourselves. When we let go of blame, we create space for peace. The Buddha said, "You cannot travel the path until you become the path itself." If we wish to walk the path of freedom, we must embody it in our thoughts, words, and actions. The journey of breaking free from suffering is not always easy, but it is always possible. It requires patience, dedication, and a willingness to transform. Each day is an opportunity to cultivate wisdom, to release what no longer serves us, and to step into a life of greater awareness. Freedom is not given by an external force. It is realized within. Just as a bird realizes it can fly, we must realize that we are not bound by the past. Every moment is a new beginning, and every step forward is a step toward liberation. Some karmic patterns take time to dissolve, requiring persistence. Just as a river slowly carves through rock, our practice of mindfulness and wisdom gradually transforms our lives. The Buddha taught that enlightenment is not an instant event, but a path, one that requires patience, perseverance, and deep understanding. You have the power to free yourself. The suffering of the past does not define you. Your actions today shape your tomorrow. Walk the path with courage, and you will discover that the gates of liberation have always been open. The power of transformation lies within you. The Buddha taught that we are not bound by the past, nor by the conditions of our birth. Our thoughts, words, and actions create the reality we live in, and at any moment, we have the power to break free from suffering. You are not defined by the struggles of your ancestors. You are not trapped by the unwholesome words spoken against you in moments of anger or jealousy. You do not have to remain caught in cycles of hardship, illness, or misfortune. The weight of past karma may seem heavy, but it is not unchangeable. Just as the lotus rises from the mud to bloom in the sunlight, so too can you rise above the difficulties that seem to hold you back. The teachings of the Buddha illuminate a path of liberation, one that leads from ignorance to wisdom, from suffering to peace. Walking the path of lasting freedom. True freedom is not just about breaking free from suffering. It is about maintaining that freedom and nurturing a life of wisdom and peace. Many people experience moments of transformation, only to find themselves slipping back into old patterns. Why does this happen? Transformation is not just about removing obstacles. It is about replacing harmful habits with mindful and wholesome living. The Buddha once told his disciples, "Just as a skilled farmer weeds his field, so too must a wise person remove the roots of suffering from their heart." If one does not replace old patterns with the right action, the mind, like an untended garden, will once again be overgrown with weeds of craving, anger, and ignorance. In the same way, a person who has freed themselves from suffering must be diligent in maintaining their mindfulness and wisdom. If one does not remain watchful, the same habits and influences that once caused suffering will return, leading them back into old cycles of pain and confusion. Guarding the gates of the mind. The Buddha taught that the mind is like a great city with many gates. If we are not mindful, harmful influences can enter and take root. Many people unknowingly invite suffering back into their lives through unwholesome choices, associating with those who encourage greed and negativity, engaging in actions that go against the Dharma, or neglecting their spiritual practice. The path to lasting freedom requires mindfulness and discernment. One must consciously choose to walk the noble path, avoiding what causes harm and embracing what brings peace. Just as a wise traveler does not return to a road that leads to danger, so too must we avoid the thoughts, words, and actions that once led us to suffering. The Buddha said, "Do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment." When we live mindfully, making each moment an act of wisdom, we naturally move away from suffering and into a life of clarity and joy. The power of separation from unwholesome influences. A person seeking true liberation must be willing to separate themselves from what keeps them bound. If one has renounced greed, hatred, and delusion, one must not return to the same environments and habits that once fueled those afflictions. The Buddha advised his disciples to be mindful of their associations, for the company we keep influences the path we walk. If you wish to cultivate peace, seek those who inspire wisdom. If you wish to be free, avoid the actions that once trapped you in suffering. Freedom is not just about rejecting what is harmful. It is about wholeheartedly embracing what is wholesome and true. Transforming the mind for lasting peace. A person's reality is shaped by their thoughts. If one has lived in suffering for years, they may believe that suffering is their fate. But the Buddha taught that nothing is fixed. Everything is impermanent, including our struggles. Just as a sculptor shapes clay into something new, we too can reshape our minds. We must replace thoughts of limitation with thoughts of possibility. Instead of saying, "I am always unlucky," say, "I create my own path." Instead of believing, "I will always suffer," affirm, "I am walking toward peace." The Buddha said, "What you think, you become. What you feel, you attract. What you imagine, you create." If we wish to walk in freedom, we must first believe that we are capable of it. The importance of daily practice. Freedom from suffering is not a one-time event. It is a practice. The Buddha advised his followers to engage in daily mindfulness, meditation, and right effort. A person who has freed themselves from suffering must maintain their inner peace through continuous spiritual discipline. Just as a river carves through stone over time, our practice gradually transforms our lives. If we become distracted and neglect our mindfulness, old patterns can return. But if we remain diligent, we create a strong foundation for lasting peace. Remaining close to the Dharma. A person who wishes to remain free from suffering must stay close to the teachings that guide them. When one remains rooted in wisdom, they are like a tree with deep roots, unshaken by the storms of life. The Buddha taught that true security is found within. If one seeks peace in external things, one will always be disappointed. But if one cultivates inner stillness, no external force can disturb their serenity. You are not bound, you are free. Do not believe the illusion that you are trapped by your past. The Buddha taught that liberation is always possible. The moment you commit to the path of wisdom, you step into a new reality. Your destiny is not determined by where you have been, but by the choices you make now. Every harmful thought, every unwholesome action, and every attachment to suffering can be released at this very moment. Walking the path of true liberation. The Buddha taught that enlightenment is not a distant goal. It is a path we walk every day. With each mindful breath, each compassionate act, and each moment of wisdom, we move closer to true freedom. Let go of the false beliefs that bind you. Reject the illusions that tell you that you are not enough. Stand firmly in the truth that you are already on the path of awakening. Walk boldly into the peace that is already within you. A meditation for liberation. Let us now take a moment to reflect and meditate. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, and take a deep breath. With each inhale, invite peace into your heart. With each exhale, release all that no longer serves you. Say to yourself, I am free. I am at peace. I walk the path of wisdom. Feel the weight of past suffering dissolve. Imagine yourself stepping into a life of clarity, strength, and boundless compassion. A path forward. Freedom is not given to us by another. It is something we cultivate within. Every moment is an opportunity to live with mindfulness, to speak with kindness, and to act with wisdom. The Buddha said, "No one saves us but ourselves. No one can and no one may. We ourselves must walk the path. So, walk forward with confidence. Embrace each day with an open heart. Trust that with every mindful step, you are moving closer to the highest peace. May all beings be free from suffering. May all walk the path of wisdom. May all find peace.